Resilient Recruiter Podcast. This is your host, Mark Whitby, and I am absolutely thrilled to be joined today by Alexis Alvarez. Alexis is the founder of Career Rockstars, a boutique talent and diversity search firm that partners with the lower and middle market PE and credit players to help make diversity more of a reality in their firms. In fact, she has a 60 to 75% diversity placement rate in her company. Alexis has over 15 years recruiting experience, and she is also a podcast host herself. Her show is called Take the Stage, and it features conversations with rock stars from the world of private equity and credit. I have had the pleasure of knowing Alexis for the last 3 years. She's one of the founding members of our coaching program and global community for recruitment business owners. Actually, prior to founding Career Rockstars, Alexis led recruitment efforts in the European and Middle Eastern digital TV spaces, working with HBO Europe and Stars Play Arabia. She's got an MBA from IE Business School in Madrid in Spain, and she is also the mother of 3 young children. As you can imagine, she is super busy. Alexis, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mark. I'm super pumped to be here. I'm really excited.
This is long overdue. Why have we not done this before?
I agree.
Uh,
I agree. No, like I said, I'm just really excited to be here and honored actually to, be a guest.
oh, the honor's mine. Alexis, I'm really curious to learn the story behind your international lifestyle, because you are an expat living in Madrid. You are from the US, and most of your clients are in the US, I believe. Why did you end up living in Europe?
Yeah, so I'm one of those, you're correct. I'm one of those Americans that went to study abroad, and to the dismay of my parents, decided I wasn't going to go back. And so it's been 17 years now that I have been residing in Spain. So, I did a study abroad my junior year of college. I'm originally from Los Angeles, born and raised in the beautiful San Fernando Valley, and spent my entire life here. And when I was looking at study abroad options, which is something I had always wanted to do and knew from very young that I wanted to go abroad at some point, I decided to go to Spain. I spent a year there, loved it, came back, finished up my degree, and started working. And when I still didn't really have like a very clear path at the time. I began working for a nonprofit organization, working with students and professionals, and really enjoyed kind of that element of working with students, and I was a membership coordinator for a society, the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. And so I really enjoyed that piece of working with students and, kind of helping them. It was in many ways kind of just a very superficial, maybe top level way of, kind of career coaching and kind of guiding them. And so, those kind of indications were always there, but it wasn't, I think I did that for a couple of years. I even started my own business. I started my own business, again, working with international. So there's a pattern here, working with international students that were looking to come to the US and believe it. So I like to joke actually that, and I was having this conversation with my husband the other day because I said, this was kind of, this is 2003 or four, probably four. And it was basically a really early version of Airbnb. So I was working with, what do we do in LA? We act, we have Hollywood. So I was working with the acting schools that attracted a lot of international talent. But because they weren't universities or any kind of, formal institution, they didn't have, they didn't have campuses, and they didn't have like dorms or anything to help the international students that were coming to study their acting courses. So I partnered with them, and I would, basically try to find these international students roommates and housing options. And so, I did that for about maybe 2 years. And in after about 2 years, I was taken to small claims court.
Oh, okay.
And I was 20, I was 24, so I had an unhappy roommate who took me to small claims court, and I was 24. And it wasn't, in the end, nothing happened. It didn't work out in her favor. But it was enough for me to jolt me, because that was a bit somewhat of a traumatic experience when you're 24 and someone takes you to small claims court for something that that I don't think that that I was really at fault for. And so at that point, so again, I'm like 24, maybe 25, and I decide, okay, like I know this isn't what I want to do right now. So I would love to go back to Spain and have another international experience. I always wanted to do an MBA, so I thought, okay, these are signs from the universe, to take this pause and to go abroad. And so I decided to go and do my MBA, and I finished up my MBA. It was a 1 year program, and started working right away out of my program before I graduated. I think I was one of the first people to have an offer on the table. And so I started working in Spain, and that's kind of how, like how I got my life began in Spain. I thought, well, I'll start, working here for a couple of years, and then at some point I'll go back. But life just kind of happens, and you end up getting rooted. And so I ended up, after my post MBA experience, was working at a business school in their professional development, sorry, their executive education department. And here we were working, and this is kind of really where my path, I think, starts to take shape. And so I was working with multinationals that would send their employees to executive education programs. And so, was working with the HR, directors and development directors on these programs. And I did that for a couple of years, and then I ended up going to work for my alma mater, i.e., business school, and into their careers department. And that's really where I had kind of my first exposure to recruitment, because here we were working with students, getting them prepared to, either begin their internship or their post MBA work experience, and working with the companies in helping them to find talent. And so I did that for about 5 years, had my first child. And at that point decided, I really wanted to have more freedom. And so I took a year, over there. There's a lot of, you have a long maternity leave. And so I was able to extend my maternity leave and really think about what it is that I wanted to do. And I ended up, when I decided, looking back, or looking, towards the future, um, again, I didn't really have like a clear idea, but I knew what I liked to do. And so I ended up connecting with someone. And they basically said, well, we are part of a startup, and we really need help building out our team here in Spain. And would you want to help us? And so that basically turned into a 3 year gig of helping them build their tech development team. So it's a very windy path here.
It's
their
amazing.
their tech development in Spain, because they were going to be basically, we're talking 2014, before the streaming
Hmm.
services, before being able to watch anything online really became, like, the norm. So it's still an emerging kind of product and service. And we were building out the development hub for a company that was going to launch in Spain, and then it was going to launch in the Middle East. And I did tech recruitment for part of that, and ended up becoming the head of HR and recruitment. And they ended up scrapping Spain, keeping the development center in Spain, but launching the service in Dubai and in the Middle East. And so at that point, my scope changed because I was doing recruitment in the Middle East for kind of more management roles, and then doing tech recruitment in Spain. And so it was a really an awesome experience because it was truly, it was a heavily funded startup, which eventually went on to become Stars Play Arabia, which was acquired by, I think, Lionsgate not that long ago. Um, but it was an incredible experience because it was my first time really in a truly, recruitment heavy role. My title was HR director, director of HR and recruitment, but it was really, really recruitment was the bulk of my job. And so I got to do that in Spain, and I got to do that in the Middle East, and just had a boot camp type of role, of learning not only proper recruitment, but recruitment in markets that I had really had no experience in. So I had to quickly learn all the nuances of recruitment in the Middle East, um, and Europe. So that's kind of the first part. I don't know if you wanna if you like
Wow,
like
that's it is a windy path, but I can see how each step kind of leads slowly but surely to what you're doing today. At what point did you decide, like, I want to do this for myself and turn this into a business?
yeah, yeah. So at this point, I've been in this role for a couple years. The office in Dubai was really growing, and they wanted me to move to Dubai. I was pregnant with my second child, and had no interest in leaving. I have a love affair with Spain. And so I had no interest in leaving Spain. And really, the role really needed to be based out of the Dubai office. And so I parted ways. And at the same time, the country manager for Spain had just gone to HBO and was looking at launching HBO in Spain, and basically bringing what is now HBO Max to Spain, because at the time it was all it was cable,
Mhm.
so there was no streaming service at that point. Um, and so he said, well, we got along really great, and we worked very closely together, at Stars. And so he said, I need someone to help me build this team. Can you come? It's a small team. There's no head count for, for someone to work recruitment. Would you be willing to do this kind of, as a freelancer or as a consultant? I was pregnant and feeling terrible, and the thought of having to go anywhere, into an office just, didn't appeal to me. And so he said this to me, and I thought, this is perfect. I can work from home, and that's how I started. It was kind of this opportunity to build out, and now I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like an incredible brand to be doing this for. And I'm working with all these folks from the U.S. that have now come to Spain to help build out this organization, and I'm now on my own doing this. And I was still in the VOD entertainment space, and HBO then became my main client. But I was on my own, and that's really kind of the humble beginnings of Career Rockstars. Um, and at the same time, because now it's like, well, don't you do private equity recruitment? And so at the same time, one of my buddies from the MBA had just joined a middle market private equity firm in New York, and was building out his team, and said the same thing to me. I need help. I need help building out my team, and I need a recruiter that I can trust. And I know you, and you're working with a really great brand, so you're legit. Basically, is what he said. I knew nothing about private equity, nothing. And I said, of course I can help you. Like, yeah, how hard can it be? I'm working with like HBO, and thought very highly of myself. And so he brought me on, and that's kind of like another path. So at one point in my career, I was doing So I should also mention that like everything that I was doing with HBO and on the entertainment side was strictly in Europe. And so I ended up doing, part of my work was on the European side, working, HBO Spain turned into HBO Portugal, which then turned into Finland, Sweden, and a couple other countries. And then at the same time, I was beginning this recruitment, private equity recruitment in New York. And so working across all these different time zones. And that's what I was doing probably for about 2 years. And it ended up until about COVID, actually, and maybe a little bit before. And I always joke that, while I was doing this, there's only so many conversations about Game of Thrones that you can have before, you're just like, okay, there's more. And I really loved the conversations that I was having and the interviews and everything that I was learning in when I was doing these private equity roles, and I just found it much more enriching to me and to the candidates, and so that's when I decided to really kind of leave the European entertainment kind of space and really just focus on the US market and specifically within private equity.
Amazing. Wow. I don't think I know that. I knew that whole story before.
No?
I knew parts of it, but it's really interesting. So, what was it about the private equity space that, resonated for you that you felt like, hey, I really like this. This is what I want to concentrate on?
I found everything fascinating. I found that just this concept of acquisition, of taking taking capital and looking at how to invest this, and not only because the companies I work with, it's not just about financial engineering, it's about performance improvement, and how can we take a business that has done well but hasn't really been able to kind of take that next step in their journey, and really move kind of they a lot of the times are family founded businesses, with lots of kind of legacy type of processes and structures, and so the firms that I work with really look at, okay, how can we improve this organization, and how can we not only increase revenue, but how can we deliver value in a different way to the organization and to the end users. And I found that piece to be really transformational, and you look at just the overall, the big picture, and there's so much potential in terms of creating, because these are companies that, a lot of them fuel local economies, right? And they are, in my opinion, and this is what probably gets me the most excited. I mean, this is the engine of the economy. These are small businesses. I mean, these are businesses, I'm working in a segment of the market that we're not talking the $1 billion deals. We are talking, again, the family founded businesses that maybe, are going to be making, let's just say, less than 500 million in revenue, right? So these are, not the huge businesses and the huge, $1 billion deals that you hear about in the news, right? You don't even hear about these deals, unless you're in the space. So that piece I found to be most interesting, and I would listen to my candidates talk to me about exactly the types of projects that they were doing and what kinds of initiatives they were implementing, and the challenges of taking a family business, and having to affect change in an organization, and how they went about doing that. That to me was, like I said, the most fascinating piece. And when you compared it to the other conversations that I was having, like I said, with a lot of my entertainment candidates, I mean, it's interesting, and not to discredit, like not to devalue anything, but I just, like I said, there's only so many conversations about content, like entertainment content and shows that you can have, where it's just like, okay, this isn't life changing or life altering, right? But on the other hand, these conversations it's real life. It's real life, and these are people that are, working, to transform, and that's really what got me excited.
I love it. That makes total sense. So, how does the diversity piece factor in then? And how did you come to the realization that that was going to be a kind of key differentiator for you and something that you really believed in, and you were going to, um, make that, how can I put this? Like, you're going to make this your mission to uh, help your clients to build more diverse companies.
Yeah, yeah. So I when I was working, when I started, I thought, "Oh, these are just a whole lot of white guys here." That
Right.
was like my initial thought, for lack of a better, less diplomatic way to say it. And so, my initial client never said anything. They never explicitly said, "Oh, we'd like to see more women," or "We'd like to see more people of color." It just seemed very common sense to me, Mark, to say, why don't we I start make it, why don't I make more of an effort to, reach out to women, and so it was just common sense to me. And I don't know why. Maybe it's, being growing up in LA. You're in a really diverse setting. I don't know. It just seemed like, okay, well, let's try to branch out a little bit more and find, you know talk to other candidates. And so I always kind of had that in mind. And I I started to, I think after about maybe 2 years or so, I started to look at my numbers. And looking back, I was like, oh, I've actually made a lot of placements that have been women. I've made a lot of placements that have been, people of color, and everyone that kind of maybe even falls under that umbrella of diversity. And those numbers were showing that they were, depending on the year, were like between like 60 and 75%. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And I didn't really see a lot of that out there. And it was really like in 2020, when the world was falling apart, um, that I guess me being in so I'm in Europe, and I'm working with US companies, and I'm seeing everything happen in the US from, I think, from a different lens. So I'm not living it, but I'm experiencing it in a very different way. And so I just thought, you know, what's happening, like, there I could be doing more. Like, I can be doing more, and I should be doing more, and I'm not going to join a protest, because I don't do that. And I won't write a letter to my senator, even though that is a civic duty that we should do. But I just felt moved to do something, and being, working from a distance, I just thought, okay, well, what can I do? And that's really when I decided to double down on, on increasing, the number of diverse candidates that are, even in this, in my pipeline, at least. And that's really how it started. And what I found was that the more I talked about it, the more firms were like, yes, like shaking their heads, like, yes, that we love that. And that really kind of fueled me, to say, okay, that there's no one is really doing this. Everyone is kind of just talking about it, but no one's really taking action. And I just thought, like, I can take more action, and this is how I can use my influence, to bring about change, to something that I think is important.
Amazing. I love that because you've got a lot of, you're just full of passion and positive energy. And I love that you've found some like work that fulfills you in that way. Um, what have been, well, let's start with like, what do you feel most proud of having achieved looking back over your, business and career, particularly since you've really worked for yourself?
Um, I don't know. Sometimes, sometimes I feel like that question is hard. I ask that question all the time. Like, what are what are your major
Right,
achievements,
right.
right? Or what are you most proud of? And I feel like That's hard. Sometimes when I take that step back and I think, gosh, like I am doing I have this business. I have a pretty good brand. I'm doing it from a completely different continent. I've had, like 2 children, in the meantime while I'm doing this. And I sometimes I think, oh, like that's, whatever. But then I think back like, no, that's hard.
That is hard.
That's hard to that's hard. Like I have 3 kids, 2 of them were born as, like one of them was probably the reason why I started my own, decided to go off, when I really look at it is the reason why I decided to go off on my own. Um, but I think I don't know, it's probably a couple things that I'm proud of. I'm proud that I've been able to build I've been able to learn, I guess, so quickly, like in a space that I I was afraid of private equity like in college. Well, I didn't even know what private equity was in college. But I stayed away from finance. I was a business major, not a good sign. But I was a business major, but like the finance piece of it always made me a little bit nervous. And so, you know, I look at myself now and I can have a conversation with managing directors of, these, they manage billions in assets. And I can have a conversation and they listen to what I say. Is what I think is like really amazing to me and has proven to me like, I'm completely capable of doing whatever it is that I want to do. And really the only one that's limited, the only thing that's really limited me is me. So I think that it's actually, having built a firm dedicated to private equity. And of course, I'm extremely proud of the fact that I work with women and people of color and diverse candidates in general. And the feedback that I get is, you know, y- I had no idea people like you existed, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. And that
Love that.
fills I talk a lot about filling my bucket,
Yeah,
and that fills my
I
bucket.
bet. Absolutely. Wow, that's cool. What do you think has been some of the challenges or obstacles or setbacks that you've encountered in your journey, Alexis?
Me, I have been my biggest
Say
setback
more about that.
and my
What
biggest
do you mean?
challenge. Kind of going back to what I said is that, it's those limiting beliefs. And, I feel like now, I'm 42 now. And I think, I have a level of confidence that I didn't have, like even 2 years ago or 3 years
Oh, that's
ago
awesome.
and question myself,
Hmm.
question what, like, do I belong? Like, I mean, of course, I think that's very normal to have those sentiments. Like, what am I doing? Do I even know what I'm doing? Do I even know what I'm doing? I've never worked in private equity. I've never worked on a deal, and you're speaking with incredibly bright people all the time. And so that has made me, especially earlier on, a little bit
Hmm.
insecure. And I think that really limited kind of maybe my growth and the growth of the company because, you just kind of think, oh, I can't do that, or I'm not smart enough, or if only I found myself saying like, if only I, if only I could understand it like, differently, or if only I had experience here. And now I look back and I think, okay, well, that's BS. Like,
Absolutely.
it's really just me giving myself excuses
Right.
is about what I see, right? So I think that I have been the biggest setback to myself, the biggest challenge to myself is that mental piece of it, because obviously as a business owner, that the mental piece is a huge part of it. And
Huge.
so that has become more evident with every year in this business and every year that I go around the sun, right?
Absolutely. So let's just talk about that a little more because you are so right. I think that is inevitably the biggest uh, roadblock or limitation is ourselves and our own mindsets. So, um, which is it's hilarious. Like from the outside looking in, you're a multilingual business owner with an MBA, obviously incredibly smart and capable person. And yet we're always our own worst critic, aren't we? So, you know, the way other people see you is completely different often to how we see ourselves. And we are inclined to sort of minimize or downplay our brilliance and to focus in on like what we're not amazing at or our weaknesses and that sort of thing and almost magnify those. What um what do you think helped to dislodge some of those limitations and embrace like this new confidence that you're developing?
Um, well, you.
Oh,
That was a big part of it. That was certainly a big part of it. I guess I have to give credit to my husband. I guess.
I guess he can have
um,
some credit.
I guess I have to give credit to my husband because he was actually, like I had been here, like I had never really thought about coaching. I had never really thought about coaching. It was more me kind of just saying out loud, I wish someone could help me or that could show me how to do this. And, he came across something. It was actually like another group, and he was like, well, look, these people reached out to me, and this is maybe you want to consider it. And it was kind of like, well, yeah, maybe, like, and so the more like, and then, the magic's in the follow-up, right? Because they kept following up with him, not me. They kept following up with him. Um, and so he kept telling me about it. And it sparked my curiosity. And I ended up opening myself up to, oh, okay, well, look, I didn't even know that there were people that did this. And so that really was probably the first part of me embarking on this kind of maybe personal development journey that I hadn't thought of. And so, I ended up, coming across some of your content and then, joined the group, and that really helped to just open up the melon. Right, and it makes you think in a very different way. And at least for me, and that's like I talk a lot about this with my clients and my candidates is and I kind of created a framework with the work that I do, and one of them is about being patient. And I found myself patience is like a concept that is very overlooked and very under, it's under appreciated. And I found myself just last week saying, to someone, you need to have patience with, I was talking in the context of diversity, but then I said something like, we need to have patience with ourselves. And we don't understand that because we live in a world where everything needs to be really quick. And everything you want to see results immediately. And when you don't, it's disheartening, and it's very easy to say, oh, this, doesn't work, or, whatever it may, you lose your patience, right? You just,
Yep, been there.
and yeah. And so, for me, I don't know. I just it's taken a little while. It's not immediate, right? Like you don't just have these mind-blowing moments and then say, okay, like life is going to be different. No, it's gradual, right? But the key is to be consistent. And so that's really what like I think helped this transformation is that you open yourself up to development, and then it starts to happen little by little. And that's where like really the patience piece comes in. So it's been 3 years that I've been in the group, and I find that I'm still like I'm still on the journey, and hopefully the journey doesn't end ever, right? Like I always want to be, I as much as I don't like thinking, I don't there are some things that I don't know or I wish I was better at. I feel like I also need that to keep me, you know, pushing me along to keep wanting to be better and wanting to learn more and, be more to continue to be hungry, I guess
Love it.
is what I'm trying to say.
Fantastic, Alexis. That's so cool. Could you talk a little bit about this framework that you developed? Because I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. So, I again, it's there's patterns in our lives, right? And so like just like I mentioned how the diversity piece was kind of it started as something common sense to me. It was the same thing where I was thinking like, okay, what do I see are the problems when I'm working with firms when it comes to attracting diverse talent, and what do I think needs to be in place in order for them to be successful. Um, and so when I started to, I started to write it down. I was asked to present at a client's meeting and present, a 45-minute PowerPoint. And I thought, well, what do I present? And so I actually started to put down everything that I did onto paper. And I realized, again, going back to common sense and just simple concepts of, I thought, well, this is really what is needed. It's not we're overcomplicating things because that's just what humans are good at doing, right? Overcomplicating things. And so I thought, well, it's about patience. So what does that mean in this context? It means that that diversity, so finding a underrepresented group to work in your firm takes time because there's a number of reasons why. But patience is a key part, and so that means you need to plan in advance. You need to plan 1 or 2 quarters in advance. And then I thought, with my own personal journey, nothing really happened until I became like really, really happened until I got really clear on the purpose,
Mm.
like why I'm doing things, what I wanted to achieve. And then, of course, you have to move with intention. So it's kind of credibility through action, right? So you being very intentional with what you're doing. And it's something that like patience, purpose, and intention, that framework, I've started to apply it to everything that I do. So not only with the clients that I work with and telling them how to help them and what they need to do and what patience in their context means and purpose and intention in their context means, but like with candidates who, want to make a move, it's the same simple concepts that are applied, but just you're adapting them to different scenarios. And personally, like when I reflect on everything that everything that I've done, I've thought, well, nothing happened until these three things were present, until I understood, okay, it's not going to happen overnight. Anything good is not going to happen overnight. And you have to have a very clear idea of what you want. And then you have to move with intention, like everything from finding my husband to, living in Spain to building my business, all of those things. And I realized that. And I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And this is what others can do or can replicate, to help get them where they want to be, especially in terms of diversity.
Amazing. So patience, purpose, and intention. I love that. And Alexis, you've not mentioned a couple of amazing things that you've achieved, which so I'm going to remind you, and then you can talk a little bit about those. So one of which was um, launching your podcast. So can you say a little more about why you did that and how it's benefiting the business and also the PE industry?
Yeah. So again, I'm gonna like have to toot your horn, because actually you're the reason why I have a podcast. I think, Mark, because in our one of our first calls, I said, I don't like to do feel like I'm selling to anyone. And that for me is, I don't know if it's because I'm millennial. I don't know what it is. If I'm even millennial, what you consider me. But one of the things you said to me was, why don't you try to do a podcast? Because I had never, I guess let me take a few steps back. I had never really had to do business development before in my business because I had the privilege, which is a double-edged sword, of never having to actively seek out new business because new business was always referred to me, and I would land a client based off of someone else's referral. So extremely fortunate to have that, but at the same time, not very wise to only rely on referrals. And, it was, I had a moment at some point where I was like, I can't do this. Like, this doesn't make sense. I need to seek out more business. But I had never been in this type of role. And so I was very reluctant to try any of the traditional channels, right? With cold, like how I feel about cold outreach. I do not like to do cold calling. And I felt like, especially a few years back, there was more of a conversation around cold calling, compared to some of, a lot of the other channels that are out there now. And so one of the things you suggested was a podcast, and obviously, like, I like to talk, as we've already established, and so I thought, well, this would be really, that could be really interesting. And so I decided to, have this podcast. And I would call it, since my firm is called Career Rockstars, I would call it Take the Stage. And I really wanted to focus on women, because female candidates became a really challenging segment to recruit, for private equity and just the overall investment space. And so I thought that this could be really interesting, um, to to connect and to hear stories, from women in the space. And so I dedicated a series called Ladies Who Rock that was just going to be exclusively focused on women that are, either well established or up and comers. And it was probably the smartest business decision that I've ever made, because I think all of my business, for the last 2 years has come either directly or indirectly off the heels of the podcast. So, now I do business development. And one of the things that I like to lead with is, or an easy way to lead, to start a conversation, is with the podcast. And so I would, for the first 2 years, really just focus on reaching out to women across all levels. And it was just a really easy, I found it very seamless. And not only were these people, um, really flattered that, they were being invited to be a podcast, and the ones that were maybe not so flattered and didn't really, think that they would want to do it, were very kind, and, would maybe refer me potential guests, or, they didn't want to be a podcast guest, but they wanted to do business with me. And so it's really been a great experience. And now I'm 2 years in, and I've expanded now. Actually, my first episode, this week, for the broader platform, Take the Stage, um, was launched, and so now I'm speaking to men and to women, and hearing these different perspectives, but all under kind of this diversity landscape. And so I made it a point. I think that this is a really important piece to not. And actually, I just had a conversation with a candidate that I placed, right before I did this call, and he's like, I really like your podcast because it doesn't just talk about deals. Because in private equity and in the investment space, you talk a lot about the deals, everything that went into it. That's been done, and I wanted to hear, like, their stories. And I made it a point to not only speak with senior folks, like the managing directors, and, like the really, seasoned people, because I felt, I spend a lot of my time talking to early career professionals. So these are people that have 2 to 3, let's just say, somewhere between 2 to 5 years of professional experience. And there's really nothing out there for them, in terms of resources or content. Everything's out there is with the deal makers, and people that have maybe 15, 20, 30 years of experience on them. And so I really wanted to have something where you could have someone that has 3 years of experience and listen to a peer talk about their journey. How did they get into it? What did they do? The lessons and the insights that they can share. And so the show really, talks to a really broad audience in terms of seniority level. Um, because I think it's important to tell everyone's story and not just focus on, the ones that have already made it. They're important too. But I think it's also really great to hear someone that's at your level or just, the next level above you, and to hear what that experience is. So that's kind of been my journey to date with the
I love
podcast.
that. You're doing a phenomenal job, Alexis, with your podcast and also just your content in general. People should definitely check you out on LinkedIn, Alexis Eva Alvarez, and see the kind of stuff you're posting as well, because you are really doing a fantastic job of building your brand and your authority in your space, and really becoming known, as the person who makes diversity reality for lower and middle market PE firms. So I love how you're
Thank
really
you.
owning that niche, and you're being very visible and valuable around that. So that's super cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
Thank you. I want
go
I
ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just gonna add that you don't know who at the end of the day, you don't know who you're reaching and who you're talking to.
Yep.
And I feel like we need to harp on this a
Okay.
lot because I have made like I never posted up until I joined your group. That's another thing. I never posted anything. Not one post on LinkedIn. And so I started doing that when I joined the group, and I made it very intentional with my posts. And everyone knows, sometimes it's like ugh, no one liked it, or we don't get that self gratification, and it's like what ugh, it took me like an hour to write the post, and I like nothing happened. And at the end of the day, you don't know, even if you don't have a lot of like the metrics don't seem like they're there. I've have at least 2 or 3 examples of someone that referred someone to me that I'm not even connected with, and or that I've never spoken to. Um, Tell them, that person, like, "Oh, you should talk to Alexis because she's the one you wanna speak to." And I think, "Who referred you?" "Oh, so and so referred me and said that, like, yeah, you're the person I need to speak to." And I look, and that someone has, like, we are maybe a second connection, or we've connected on LinkedIn, but we've never engaged in a conversation. And so it just goes to show you that you're being heard and you're being seen, and you leave an imprint, even though it doesn't really like look like that from where you sit. So it's really important. I think I can't underestimate or emphasize that enough, that just how important it is to be present on LinkedIn. So that's
I'm so
it.
glad you shared that story because, well, that's patience, purpose, and intention again, isn't it? It's another example of that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's so true. Like it takes courage to put yourself out there, right? Whether it's through a podcast or publicly like sharing content on LinkedIn, especially if it's your own original ideas or your, original content, and you're creating something and putting it out there, and you really can never know the impact that's going to have and what people and opportunities that might attract. Um, and it's just amazing how that can really snowball. There's a really long tail as well with podcasts. So, someone might listen. You've been doing this for 2 years now, and it's those episodes that you recorded 2 years ago are still assets that are working for you, because someone might come across one of your previous episodes or find your show and start consuming those episodes. And that work that you did way back then is still having a positive impact now. So it's just amazing what can happen. Um, could you also tell the yeah,
100%.
yeah. Could you tell the story? Because I was really proud when I heard this, that you beat Heidrick and Struggles in a pitch and won that really amazing piece of business.
Yeah, that you're right. Like I forgot that. forgot about that. Yeah, that was actually huge. And just I had worked with a client in the U.S. on a role in for their office in the U.S. They were expanding into Europe, and I said, they knew I was based in Madrid. And I said, well, hey, I'm in Europe and, I have experience in some of the other European markets. And so I'm happy to help. And, they gave me, a VP level role. And so I said, okay, I'm happy to work on this VP level role. And about a week later, they had said, if you happen to find some candidates that could be for the MD level, maybe you want to, just let us know. And so, I kind of thought, all right, well, I'll keep that in mind. Um, and I ended up becoming, again, they were all American. They had no experience, at least the recruitment team in the US, working with any European market. And so, things, they were working in the Netherlands. So a lot of different nuances, to kind of deal with. And, I said, well, I have some really great candidates for you for the MD role. And, they said, okay, like this is great. And they said, you know what, we're not happy with Heidrick Struggles. You've just been, I guess I delivered just a different level of service to them. Not even, like in this initial, like the ramp up. Right. And so I think that they were evaluating, kind of looking at who to work with. And I think that, the fact that I was American, but in Europe and, helping them and letting them know, well, look, this is how things are done here. This is what, like, the little different cultural nuances that you might come across. And this is where, like, these are what candidates look for in Europe. And these are just giving a whole lot of color to someone that maybe doesn't have that international experience. And so, when I told them that that I had candidates for them and I had like three of them and they were lined up and ready to go, they're like, we're not going to even consider Heidrick anymore. So that was just like, I was like, oh, all right, well, that's great to hear. And then I got off the phone and I was like,
Amazing. I love that story.
yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah, yeah.
And you ended up filling both of those positions, didn't you?
So I ended up filling the managing director
Okay.
role, which was huge because
Absolutely.
I had never done a managing director role before. And so that was huge. And it was a really awesome opportunity. And then they ended up giving me two more roles on top of that for that particular office. So I ended up placing like three, and it was a small office. And so three of those roles, three of like a 10-person team were filled by me.
Amazing.
Um,
It's
yeah, so it was
what I love
awesome.
is the domino effect here, Alexis, like how the work you're doing leads into something else, which leads into even more opportunities. Working on an MD level role almost allows you to do business development without doing business development because your recruiting calls and those meetings with candidates then become, you know, essentially meetings with also future, potential clients. So it just opens up so many more avenues for you as well.
No, it's you know, uh, yeah, it was awesome. Because it just the one take away the piece of like like it's a big fee, and it's a big role. The confidence that I had after that is like probably the most important win. That like the fee is good, but but the confidence piece, because I don't know, it was almost like proving to myself I can do this. Like
Yes.
I've done it. I just did it and I did a good job. And again, I feel like the times that I've struggled in my life, whether it's my career or personal life, it has been when I've overthought
Yeah.
things, when I overthink it, and just don't do it. Right. Or it's like I didn't even think about it in terms of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what a managing director, I've never done this. I just did it and I was like, okay, just and that's something that I find myself saying a lot now. Just, just do it. Just continue to do it every day, even when you don't want to do it, or even when you don't think you can do it, or you don't think you're doing a really good job. Just do whatever it is that you need to do to get whatever job that you're trying to do done, because that, it's like those little steps that are going to really, you look back and you're like, oh, okay, they were micro steps, but they were, 150 micro steps. So, like that actually, that there's progress there. So, yeah.
Amazing. I love it. Um, could we talk briefly about being a working parent? Because we both have three kids. Mine are now teenagers. In many ways, it's getting easier. There's new challenges, but in terms of the amount of time, effort, and lack of sleep and all that stuff that goes into it, that part's a lot easier. But I remember when they were little, like in fact, there's probably about a 5 to 10 year period where I was just continuously sleep deprived, and you still have to perform at work, right? And you still have to make stuff happen. How have you managed that piece? Because on the outside looking in, it looks like you have absolutely figured this out and you're like the queen of, you know, business, running a business and being a mom at the same time. What's your secret there?
Oh, there's no secret. I lose my mind probably, at least once a day. In summer, I find that it's like intensified more when they're
Right.
not in school. But I think, I mean, when they were little, so when it was just kind of maybe the two of them. I mean, I had my son. Like in fact, I didn't want to. I'll tell the secret now. Like I didn't want to tell HBO that or maybe it was the third one. I have too many kids
I
where I
know
mix them
it's
up.
it.
I don't remember which one it was, but I remember with both of them. I think it was the last one. I didn't want to mention that I was like, I think they called me like on the way to the hospital for my cesarean, and I didn't want to say like I'm having a baby today. And so I was like, yeah, I could start. It was like a Wednesday. And I'm like, yeah, Monday I'll work. And I and I worked.
Oh,
And
Alexis,
I kicked off a call and I did that.
that's
Why? Like,
insane. What were
I
you
don't know why.
thinking? What, like,
I don't know, but it was manageable. It was manageable. It wasn't something that was like, crazy. But I remember like having between with both of the last ones, like my son and my daughter, like feeding and then doing a call, and then like, putting the baby down and like going back and doing that. But in many ways I really appreciated that because I worked from home and it was convenient. I could schedule that. And I wouldn't have necessarily had that freedom. I mean, like if I was employed, I would have been on like a maternity break and it probably would have been a little bit easier. But I mean, I thought it was manageable. And I don't remember, to be honest, Mark, I feel more stressed out now that my kids are grown up. Well, grown up now that they're 4, 7, and 10 than when I had, when the two were babies. And I just feel like like they're at different stages right now where it is harder to balance everything. I don't even know if balance is the right word.
yeah,
I feel like balance, like you're never really balancing
no,
anything, right? Like
exactly.
that's maybe a myth. Like it's like managing,
Right,
like,
right.
like I have to manage everything, and so I don't know if I'm doing a good job. I mean, I like sometimes it's easy to be hard on yourself and say like, I'm not doing a good job, but I find that like I try to make time for them. Like I have a hard stop. So in Europe, I have a hard time I have a hard stop at 7 p.m. European time, which is 1 p.m. Eastern time. So that means that like all my calls need to be done before, early afternoon on the East Coast, or, by 10 a.m. Pacific time. And that's like a non-negotiable. Like I sit down and we have dinner with them, or together, all of us
Love that.
as a family. And that's like what they've come to know.
Yeah.
Whether it's a peaceful dinner is like a completely different
Yeah,
story,
no,
but we are
definitely not. But at least you're
we're
together.
sitting down,
Yeah.
and yeah. And that's like a for sure thing. That's a for sure thing. And so I think that like when, I think it's about looking at like, okay, what is that? What do I want? Do I want to have, that was always something that I had in my family. Like I knew for sure that we were going to be eating dinner
Yeah, me
together no
too.
matter what. And we were eating at the table always. And so like for me, that's really important. So I make sure that we have that. And then, like it's never going to be perfect, right? Like I feel like we have that. It's a myth to think that it's going to be perfect and then it's going to be easy, because it's not. Owning your business is never easy.
Yeah.
Being a parent is never easy. Doing it together is, it's never easy. So I think it's just understanding that and saying, okay, it's not perfect. I'm not perfect. This isn't perfect, but we do the best that we can. And you take those moments and try to replicate them as much as possible.
I love that. And maybe it's about patience, purpose, and intention again.
And it is about a whole lot of patience. A whole lot of patience.
But you're right.
Yes.
Getting as many of those moments as possible. I think that's well said. Alexis, this was a fun conversation. Thank you so much.
I love it. Yeah, I know. This was like having a little, felt like having a little drink, little little
good
coffee
catch up.
time break here.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and can't wait to see you soon.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. I loved it.
Thanks again. Thank you for listening to The Resilient Recruiter. I know how busy recruiters are, so I'm honored that you're investing this time with me each week. I don't take your attention for granted. That's why I'm going all out to deliver value for you here, real insights you can apply to improve your business. And if you really want to help me to reach a wider audience and impact more people, please consider leaving the show a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you leave me a review, please reach out and let me know so I can thank you personally. Please hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.